it's so important that they trust me, that they feel they're able to say what they need to say or want to say without being judged. And so it is that sense of safety and grounding and openness that cultivates that trust and safety very quickly. That's always a priority for me.
Hello everyone, welcome to Crowe Corner, where we discuss issues and topics important to our clients. I'm delighted to be joined by Mehibe. Mehibe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mehibe Hill. I'm a leadership and mindset coach, predominantly to global mobility managers and senior leaders in the mobility world.
Excellent. Okay. So thanks for taking time out to have a good conversation. So I'll just begin with the research we did. So we did some research last year, taking care of global mobility professionals, and what we found was that pressure complexity was increasing. So we dug a little deeper as to why, and the reasons we found were all about education. So there was a lack of education in the business of how to engage with global mobility teams, and a lack of education in the business on the complexity and timescales of global mobility. So we set about, well, how do we change this scenario of pressure, complexity, education, opportunity? And we built a model, right? And the model looked at moving from one stage to the next, so 3 stages. And those 3 stages had 3 areas of review: operations, skills, and mindsets. Now, mindsets is an area that you work with as a coach. So to tell me about the importance of mindsets when you're coaching people, both their mindset and actually the mindset you bring.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we start with the mindset of a global mobility manager, so there's different angles we could take on this in terms of their mindset being in the space, in the coaching space, and actually, how do I support them to have the mindset that they want coming out of the coaching space? So if you were to ask a global mobility manager, a senior leader, they would say that they want to have a growth mindset based on confidence, based on resilience. And I would describe that mindset myself as having a vulnerable and a courageous mindset. And they have the same components. So a global mobility manager, a senior leader, is looking to be able to navigate uncertainty and complexity. So that means being able to have resilience when it comes to hearing the word no. So actually being comfortable with managing no's. And I always say to my clients, this is about being comfortable with no's, and also understanding how to make or sort of cultivate a no into a yes. So their mindset is based on, navigating complexity and uncertainty, being able to have that resilience, out there in the world, and to be seen as being resilient, and also having that inner confidence, having that confident mindset that whatever happens, they can come out and deal with anything. And that is really important when we think about the complexity and the uncertainty that global mobility managers need to navigate, because it's never ending, it's relentless, right? So that's where the resilience piece comes in. And for me, the reason why I said vulnerable and courageous is because actually it is about having fear and seeing opportunities, seeing opportunities to learn and grow. And that takes courage, because something needs to be different. So we are looking at, I'm looking at supporting global mobility leaders to essentially cultivate a new, stronger mindset.
And so what mindset do you take to those conversations?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that I think about in terms of, well, how do I want to show up in the space? My priority is, like yours, taking care of global mobility leaders. And so my mindset is one where it's open. It cultivates a space, so not just thinking about my mindset, but actually what is the space that I want to hold for my clients. And it's about being open. It's about being okay with emotions. It's about expression. It is about being vulnerable. It's about saying it's okay to have fears. It's okay to be human. And I also, if I take it from a practical point of view, I am continuously managing my energy, very much like my clients. And so I only have, a very limited number of slots or sessions because my mindset needs to be present. I am continuously processing data and information. So it's not just the language that the global mobility managers are using, it's their body language, their facial expressions. It's about reading into the narrative that is in the unsaid. And that takes a lot of experience and practice, and that is where I bring a different sort of presence or mindset than obviously my clients, and I am supporting them in the exploration and the safety in that space. It's so important that they trust me, that they feel they're able to say what they need to say or want to say without being judged. And so it is that sense of safety and grounding and openness that cultivates that trust and safety very quickly. That's always a priority for me.
So tell me about how someone could go about changing their mindset, because that's literally what our model suggests needs to happen.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's important to sort of put it out there that there's no easy fix. It's not that you have one coaching session or one thing happens and then suddenly a mindset is changed. There is a journey that needs to happen in order to start creating space, sort of mental and head space, for somebody to be able to change their mindset or shift into a different way of seeing their world or processing their world, but also processing their inner world. When we think about mindset, there's so much that's going on here and in the heart and also in the gut and the stomach. But if I was to sort of take a step back and go, okay, what are the key things that are happening in coaching that supports to change or shift a mindset? It is that first piece with cultivating that safe space to be open, to explore, to cultivate self-awareness of self. So I am developing a relationship, not just with myself, but with my thoughts and my emotions, my feelings, my beliefs. So I'm exploring my belief and thought systems. So we've got that self-awareness piece and the exploration. We also then do have a really important piece of mapping what does the ideal look like, but realistically. And I always support my clients to find the language that feels good for them. What does that filter or that journey look like? Is it about being more realistic? Is it about being more compassionate, more empathetic to self, more self-kindness? Maybe it is more self-empowerment. Maybe it is about inner confidence. But we map what an ideal mindset would look and feel like, and then understanding, where am I now? It's a bit like change management. I come from a management consultancy background, and it's understanding, okay, this is the as is, and this is where I want to be. That's the future state, and there's a bridge. And so what are the things that I need to do in my role and within my relationship with myself and my identity that's going to support me to cultivate that shift in mindset? And then for me, the last piece is really about developing self-trust with me, so that we take things one baby step at a time, and by seeing that achievement, really feeling and leaning into that self-trust and that feeling of progress, I go, okay, I can do this. And so with that self-trust, you build a different level of autonomy, self-efficacy. I think it's really important that you do tap into that sense of I can, I trust myself too, I give myself permission to. And so yes, there is these sort of key pieces, and then there is another piece of, what is it that I need to let go of? Because if I have had a history with my thoughts and my beliefs, and that is what is holding me back from my desired mindset, then okay, how can I make some space here to welcome this new mindset? I need to make space by letting things go. And that takes time, and it's acknowledging and accepting and actually thanking, sort of being thankful and grateful to yourself that, okay, that served me up to now. but actually it's no longer serving me. And so making space to then welcome in new thoughts and new beliefs that is going to propel my learning and my growth and just give me a chance, give me a better chance, out in the world.
So we're doing a lot of thinking about the future, helping the profession think about the future. So just have a think about all the conversations you've had with people who work in this space. What do you think those conversations tell you about what will happen next to the profession, how the work is done, how the service is delivered? Like, what are your thoughts on the future?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I wish we had a magic ball to sort of look into the future. So I think a lot of this is just making my predictions or noticing what could be happening. What I would sort of hand on heart say is that the role of global mobility leaders and senior global mobility managers is evolving. So actually I am seeing more senior leadership within the global mobility team. And so we are already seeing an evolution of global mobility leaders and their teams becoming more strategic. They're becoming more advanced in their human-centered skills. And they are becoming more tech-enabled.
Yes.
And so I am hearing more and more that global mobility leaders, they need to manage their own budget and they need to go out there and build a business case to essentially integrate new technology to support them to automate and deal with the volume that they're dealing with. So we're on the cusp of something that is quite unique in terms of how technology is going to support global mobility teams. But I think we are moving past, or we've made really good headway with global mobility teams becoming visible. So for me, global mobility leaders are now directors, they're moving into higher positions. And so we've done the good work and we need to keep doing that good work so that global mobility teams are walking the victory laps. We need global mobility teams to be their own ambassadors. We need them to wave that flag and say, look at all the good work we're doing. And that is where the coaching really helps to support that, to say, well, I have the confidence to wave that flag and walk the victory lap, not just for myself, but for my team. So we are seeing more global mobility leaders taking that strategic seat at the table. And so now they're there and they have the voice and they have the visibility. It's about really then elevating it up. So how can they do their role in a more efficient way because of the volume, because of the complexity, because now we're moving into different demands, really. If we think about the end client, the employee and their families, their demands have changed.
Yes.
And the demands of employees has changed because we do have Gen Z, we do have, the next generation coming in and their demands are different. And so global mobility leaders are feeling different type of demands to keep that strategic eye. But what I also am seeing, which is a different skill, is that global mobility teams are now becoming very important and integral project managers. So they are now very important change management agents that will support the culture of the business. And so if they're not taking those victory laps and really showcasing all the good work they're doing, then they're going to lose that trust and that credibility to go out and make big requests on budgets and say, look, I need, £1 million or whatever it is, $1 million, $2 million to integrate this system that's going to support not just our goal, but the wider business, for sure. Yeah.
And I see a big tension because the role of the mobility team and the department has traditionally been around compliance, right? Managing compliance, let's not get in trouble, and strategic stuff. Don't get me wrong. So the technology should enable all of that compliance stuff to be more automated, which should free up time to be more human-centric. But I think therein is the tension. Do organisations effectively want their mobility departments to be almost like lifestyle coaching teams, right? Because one thing that's really, really clear is there is a separation between where people live and what they do for work. I don't think it's getting back to this. So I think that continues. You know, we might have floating cities one day, or people living on other planets. So this link between where you live and where you work has been broken forever. So actually, when that's broken, the mobility department or team are now facilitating a lifestyle, not just compliance. So what's your view on that tension? Because does the business want them to be very, very human-centric, very individual-centric, building programs around people's bespoke needs? You talked about different generations. Millennials like things to be tailored. But there's an intrinsic tension, isn't there, between simplifying things and then making them more human-centric? And I think they're caught in the middle. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree that global mobility managers and their teams are caught between the business and they're caught between their clients, their internal clients. And if you look at the profile of a global mobility manager and their teams, they are people pleasers. You know, they want to ensure that you feel good in some way. They want to ensure that you can go and do your job. They want you to essentially be able to take a breath and feel as though, the global mobility team are taking care of me. And that is not always assimilated or mirrored from the business, who, you know, their primary focus most of the time is budget and also timelines. You know, how can we do this at the least cost, you know, in the fastest time possible? But ultimately, I see great organisations are understanding that we are going through, we're on the precipice of something very, very different in corporate culture, and corporate culture is enabling lifestyle. And if we support employees to have more of a focus on their mental, their emotional, and their physical health, their well-being, we see a high level of performance. So yes, there is a tension there. Completely agree with you that there is a tension between the business and the end client, and the global mobility teams are stuck in the middle. And what they're doing is trying to do their best. You know, they're constantly trying to do their best. They are the team that everyone complains to, whether it's the end client, whether it's their relocation partner, whether it's their vendors, whether it's their internal stakeholders, their business partners, HR, their line managers. You know, they're constantly a hub of complaints. And that's really detrimental to motivation, to your energy, to how you feel about your role.
Of course.
So that's where the people pleasing is actually this sense of fulfillment and purpose. You know, if they are actually doing a greater good for the client and their family, well, that does make them feel good. And my clients do say that. It is important for them to deliver a great service, and that's where the confidence piece is so important, because global mobility leaders, especially senior managers, need to have the confidence to say, this is how it is. And actually it does cost this much, and these are the demands now, and we need to shift. Obviously, we don't want to give in to every single demand, but there needs to be adaptability for global mobility success in the future. Without that adaptability and that flexibility, they won't be able to deliver the service that is expected and needed in the way our global society is evolving and changing.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Global society. So, what do I see at the moment? The rise. So the disconnect between where you work and live. In that is the empowerment of sovereign individuals. They can go anywhere. They're so mobile. I can go live in Dubai, I could live in Barcelona, I could live in London, or I could just keep moving around every 2 or 3 years. I could pick tax systems, I can pick lifestyles. And this is a thing that I predict is going to happen. So in that environment, that global society, which kind of runs against the grain of, immigration laws are getting more complicated, tariffs and protectionism. It's like, this is happening anyway. Despite all of that, there's a bit, so I can see the role of the function in one scenario transforming into almost a family office type service, where you've got a very, very bespoke, high-touch relationship with an executive, say. Or in a different scenario, it goes back, I've automated everything, we've got smaller teams, and if the individual asks questions about how I integrate myself into Barcelona social life, well, that's your issue, not mine. So, like, where do you think this is going?
So that's a really interesting way to describe the evolution of the level of service and how. For me, it's how we are delivering that service. There has to be a sort of a softness or a lightness between those two options. Perhaps we won't move fully into family office feeling in certain organisations. However, what is interesting about that concept is it's very attractive. It's attractive to employees if they feel as though they are part of a family office. Even the word family.
Yep.
I mean, we do say, oh, work is not your family, they're not your relatives. However, if we just go a surface level deeper to what it means to be a part of a family, and this isn't always the case because not everyone gets on with their family, but if we take away that label, what we're trying to say there is, how do we cultivate a sense of belonging and a sense of acceptance without fear of being judged or rejected or disconnected from the rest of my community? And so that then becomes quite an attractive concept. And I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know whether all organisations will sort of be moving into that full family office level of service. However, organisations do need to focus on that important question of, well, how do I create a sense of belonging and acceptance in my organisation, especially in a world where we want to be accepting, we want to welcome, we want to be able to give wider opportunities to a wider set of communities. And so for me, when I think about the family office or sort of that sense of belonging and acceptance, how is it accessible?
Yeah.
Is it accessible to me, or am I being denied an opportunity because of something else?
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we're sort of sitting at the moment in the sort of normal corporate mold, which is, if you don't tick these boxes, then there's a sort of a rejection. And so that's where, for me, the adaptability piece and the flexibility is going to be really important. And if we did, deliver a level of that family office service where you've got really happy, content, fulfilled employees, but obviously within the remits of compliance and all the other necessary components, which is underpinning and it is, vitally important for global mobility strategies.
Yeah, and it's for me, the big question is, if technology reduces workloads, and logically it should, then is your job as a mobility lead to help people thrive, or is it to do the minimum necessary to stop them and the employer getting in trouble? And I think different people will have different perspectives, and also they come from different places. Like you said, people pleasers. So people pleasers possibly would want to help people thrive, rather than I have to just keep saying no. So it's going to be interesting. But let's stay with technology. So technology is changing. This year has brought so much change already. It's kind of interesting to see what happens in the next 10. But technology is changing the way we work. It's changing the way we keep informed. From a coaching perspective and from a mindset perspective, how do we prepare ourselves, and how does a global mobility leader prepare themselves to go on this technology journey? I don't think we've done this before, like this. So how do we do that?
It is a very unique challenge that we are up against right now. Not just for global mobility leaders, but I feel across certain roles, in different industries, there is this this sole dream almost that, you know, technology is going to fix all of our problems, that it's going to, you know, give us time improvements, time efficiencies, process efficiencies, it's going to reduce costs. And I do believe that it will do most of that or all of that in some way. However, what is scary is that there is an unsaid sort of feeling, or we're not talking about it enough, that people are noticing that the way that they are doing their job is under threat in some way, or it's different, and so it's scary. You know, there is a lot of fear about how technology is being integrated into our role. And so if we take a step back and go, okay, so it's going to help us automate, and that's what we want it to do, actually. We want technology to help us automate. We want to create efficiencies. You know, if I think about nearly 10 years ago when I was working on global mobility programs involving PWNs and A1s, I mean, you were looking at something crazy, you know, 250, 300 pounds to do an A1 or a PWN. That post-work notifications are much speedier now. The cost has been reduced. It's becoming an easier task. Of course, there are challenges. So we do see that there are already benefits that are being realised and banked by global mobility teams in efficiencies and process. The scary part is that with that, we are going to see a higher level of demands.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Because there is this perception that, you've got technology, so you can do things a lot faster and easier now. So that internal feeling of pressure that we've explored in the last Crowe Corner, that's going to rise, or it's going to intensify even more. I mean, how do you go to bed at night knowing that you've got hundreds of emails and all different demands sitting there when you wake up the next day? How do you get a good night's sleep? How do you leave work knowing that there is still so much to do? And that's going to take a lot of resilience, confidence, and trust in self, that they can pick it up the next day. And you know what? That's just part of life now. That's part of the norm. And it's still a huge stress point for global mobility teams if we think about the number of demands that are put on them. Yeah. So if I think about as well what's going on in the coaching space, as the demands grow, and this perception of, well, life should be easier, right? Like, now we can do more. Now you should be doing things faster. Now you can be doing things more cheaply. The global mobility leader, that senior manager, now has to essentially deal with more internal pressure. They are making decisions based on, do I prioritise my well-being and close my laptop at the end of the day, or do I just carry on doing my work because it's never ending and it's relentless? And so if I leave those hundreds of emails, well, tomorrow there'll be another 200 emails on top of that. So the coaching work is really important. I think, you know, one thing that comes up time and time again in the coaching space is that sense of never doing enough, never being enough in the role. And so the perfectionists that live within the global mobility teams sort of comes to the surface, and it does cultivate that inner narrative that can be really detrimental on emotional and mental health. That narrative saying, you know, you're not doing enough, you're not good enough. And actually, if we go back to that question, you know, how is the future for a global mobility leader changing? Well, if they're moving into more strategic and senior roles, and we're already dealing with a huge impact of sort of imposters in their role, well, if they're becoming more senior, and we know that global mobility is dominated by women, we're going to have a huge volume of very capable, very competent professionals suffering with imposter thoughts, feelings, emotions, and that impacts their behaviour. So if you leave that sort of in the shadow, untreated as such, unaddressed, then we could be dealing with a huge mental health crisis. And I think that applies not just for global mobility leaders, but for all types of leaders.
Agree, yeah. There's something you just made me think about. So technology helps you automate, respond to questions. right, or status requests. But the people asking those questions or that status could also deploy AI. So if they did that, it's a zero sum, right? They've created more demand because they're using AI to ask you more questions. You're using AI as a team to respond to those questions. So you haven't really solved anything. You've just increased the workload and found a way of coping. So that's sort of doomsday. But I think that's something along those lines that could happen. So we'll see where that goes. I use AI as an expert team to respond to demand. But the people making the demand are using AI to create more demand. So all we're doing here is increasing the demand because people are more sophisticated and ask more questions. And we're coping with it by using technology to respond to it. What next?
Yeah.
Where does that go?
Where does it end? There is something fundamentally important for us to keep in mind with the rising use of AI, and we're seeing it everywhere. Emails, marketing content, videos, posts on LinkedIn, social media, it's everywhere. Even in our text messages, our emails automate for us, would you like to use X technology, AI to respond? So what I see is happening already is a question of trust. Do I trust this material, this voice? And so with the rising use of AI, that is going to impact trust and how we are building trusted relationships and partnerships. Because ultimately we want relationships to be about partnering with the business. If you're a global mobility leader, you want to partner. And so you also don't want to feel like you're continuous sort of under attack with all of these demands and all of this sort of complexity that some of the AI automated responses brings. And it's really obvious, you can see it. There's a missing human element of it. And, I'm still learning about AI. I've been to different workshops or conferences, and we need to remember that AI is 70% baked. It is not human. It is automated robotic response, but it is not the human response.
No, of course
and
not.
It needs a human to monitor it, to essentially bring that human touch to it. So we are going to see questioning around trust, credibility, how are we going to build lasting, trusting relationships if we're questioning whether that was written by the person, or is that human there? Or is it the robot that is being puppeteered by the human? So that's something that we need to think about. And that's why, sometimes it is better for us to just take a bit of time to pick up the phone, drop by somebody's desk, have that video call, rather than see technology as a way to speed up getting things done, because actually you're hindering the journey of cultivating trust and partnership and the credibility within your role.
So we take taking care of global mobility professionals really seriously. So seriously, we enable the support of people like you, an external coach, to our clients as part of our service offering. Why is that important? Because it's objective, it's external. But tell me how objective external is good and better. Tell me about that piece.
It's taking it in its most simplistic lens. You have a space where somebody is non-biased, non-judgmental, and is there for you. And wholly for you. There is no other agenda. You are the end client. You are the focus and the center for the coach. And that's very much how I partner with my clients in this space, is cultivating that sense of trust, cultivating that sense of safety, and also a sense of belonging, that it's okay to be in this space and to be really vulnerable. To express my fears, to say them out loud, notice it, and take time to develop a relationship with self and that identity piece. How am I showing up in my world? How am I essentially holding myself back, because the enemy is not outside. The enemy sits inside our mind, and it sits inside our hearts and our body. So it is really helpful and supportive to have a space where you have a coach who has no other agenda other than to support you. And there is something really powerful when you have a space to reflect, to cultivate self-awareness, and to plan. So we have to remember that coaching is about moving to a future state. It is about going out and bringing these desires, these sort of internal wants and needs to life. So yes, it is about having a mirror. You know, that's what I see my role. I see my role as a mirror, being able to hold up and show you what it is that you can't see. Whether that's your strengths, whether that's your fears, whether that's things that we need to work on to support you to have, you know, a stronger, or the mindset that you desire. And it is about being the confidant, you know, being vulnerable, opening up. And it is also about being a validation point. And by that, I mean, not sort of being like, oh, waving the flag, oh, you're amazing and you can do this. But actually, how do you cultivate that validation for a global mobility manager to go out and walk that victory lap, you know, to wave that appreciation flag, to wave this is what we're doing, this is how we're supporting the business, to enable them to be strategic and to show all the good work that's happening in their team. So there's many different roles that a coach is playing or providing in that space. And ultimately, if you have space to explore, to reflect, and to plan, that's a gift. We don't have another space in our life where we have one person whose sole objective is to provide that safe space for you to do that.
Mehibe, thank you so much. That was so insightful. I've learned so much again from our conversation. So just turns now to say that concludes this Crowe Corner, and we look forward to seeing you next time.